Insurance professionals work hard every day to keep people safe. But as technology transforms the industry, how can insurers protect not only their clients, but also shield themselves from ever-changing cyber risks? My name's Elizabeth Blossfield, and I'm the host of the Insuring Cyber Podcast, a bi-monthly look into how the world of cyber and the business of insurance are connected. Happy October and happy Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Since 2004 in the US, we've celebrated the month of October as a dedicated month for the public and private sectors to work together on raising awareness about the importance of cybersecurity. This podcast, of course, tries to do that year-round, but this month it's always great to hear from professionals in the field about building careers in cybersecurity and the biggest issues that should be on everyone's radar. Today, we have a very exciting guest talking to us about his path to building a successful career in cybersecurity, what he learned about perseverance that he applied to a career like cyber that requires a lot of perseverance in an ever-changing landscape, and the biggest challenges and opportunities he sees ahead for cyber professionals. Boyd Clewis is a cybersecurity expert and the co-founder of the Baxter Clewis Training Academy, which he co-founded alongside his wife, Tiana Clewis. They're branded as a power couple in cybersecurity. But before that, Boyd says he had an unlikely path to building a career. He initially dropped out of college and was laid off from his first job. And while working an IT support job covering the night shift at a software company, he first discovered his love for learning about data and cybersecurity. He began building his career from there and realized that his true passion is for helping people. He wanted to help people like him discover a similar path. So he says he founded Baxter Clewis Training Academy and never looked back. Since then, he's become a cybersecurity expert and member of the Forbes Technology Council. He's the founder of consulting firm Baxter Clewis Cybersecurity, and he's the author of 2 books, Through the Firewall, where he shares his secrets to turning crisis into opportunity, and Corporate Security, where he discusses proven ways to reduce cybersecurity breaches. Boyd says that by learning how to differentiate yourself in the world of cybersecurity, you can skyrocket your value as an employee. He also says the biggest risk to an organization's cybersecurity has remained unchanged for years: insider threats, or cyber threats that come from employees, third-party contractors, or others working inside an organization. We talk about all of this and more. Check out our conversation. Hey, Boyd, it's great to be speaking with you today. How are you doing?
I am doing well, Elizabeth. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I think this is going to be a great conversation. I was really interested in learning a little bit from you, with Cybersecurity Awareness Month in October, just how you built your career in cybersecurity, any advice you have for other professionals in the space. But, before we get into that, I was wondering if you could start off with just a brief overview of your background and some of the work you do as the founder of Baxter Clewis Consulting.
Oh, my goodness. Where do we get started? So I am the co-founder of Baxter Clewis Consulting. My wife and I, we started the company a few years ago. My background is actually in tech and cybersecurity. Before I started the company, I was the senior security architect for American Airlines, and I focused primarily on helping companies implement protocols to secure credit card data. So that has been the focus of my career, and our training academy as well teaches people how to become specialists in the framework used to protect credit card data. And so just leveraging the experience I've had, we've used that to launch a pretty successful company.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like it. And I'm excited to dig into some of those details. But I guess we could sort of start from the beginning. I'm always, really interested in hearing how people, got into cybersecurity initially, why you became interested in it. So I was curious, what drew you to this career in the first place?
So it's funny, the whole cybersecurity thing. So let me tell you, before I even got into cybersecurity, getting into tech itself was interesting. I was working at the copier company in accounts receivable in Dallas, where I live. And anytime somebody's computer would break, they would have to box it up and ship it to the IT department that was in New Jersey. And so the people would be without their computers for days at a time, and I would have to pick up the slack. So I was like, we're not going to do that. So I figured out how to fix the computers myself. And that was my entryway into tech. And so the company ended up closing down a few years after that. I decided to just full blown make the transition because I was really passionate about fixing computers and whatnot, and it was fun. And so at this point in my career, after I had made the transition, I was working for a software company in Dallas, and I was working nights. I had this interest in cybersecurity because I saw the way everything was going digital, and like these hacking things and all this stuff was coming out. So I was thinking of this as like career preservation. It's like, this is a trend that I need to get on because I know it's going somewhere. This is over a decade ago. So I'm working nights at the company, and I get called in from my manager to come into the day shift because he needed to talk to me. And I'm like, oh, goodness, I'm about to get fired. I don't know why, but I'm about to get fired. And he was like, hey, Boyd, we know that you have interest in cybersecurity, and we need your help. We are about to fail a security assessment. I'm like, why are you about to fail? He's like, take a look over there in the conference room. And I look and I see this guy over there in front of an auditor during the security assessment, head dangling, sleeping, drooling. Like the guy it's horrible. The guy that was managing the security assessment for the company was falling asleep and not delivering his work on time. And so they asked me to step in. So I had to learn this standard over the weekend, jump in and save the company. And that is how I got into cybersecurity.
Wow, that's so crazy. How stressful to think that you're going to get fired. I mean, I think when anybody goes into a meeting with their manager, they're like, I might get fired. And then, to step into this whole career that you've built for yourself. And I think that's just a testament to the drive that you have that's so needed in the tech industry. You found a problem and you figured out how to solve it. And then you built your career from there. So I think that's awesome. And I know that, you've spoken in previous interviews a lot, and you talk about it on your website, about dropping out of college and then sort of getting laid off from your first job. And then, as you said, you sort of found out that you loved fixing computers and got into cybersecurity after working at the software company for a while. So can you talk about what you learned about perseverance in that process of, initially starting your career and how that led to, the success that you have now?
Sure. I had to learn a lot about perseverance just from the way that I grew up. We grew up in an economically disadvantaged environment. So we didn't have the best of the financial resources or educational resources. And when I finally got the opportunity to go to college due to some personal mistakes of my own, I was already a father when I enrolled in college, right? And then my girlfriend and I, we were pregnant with another child while I was in college. Well, my daughter, she passed away a few days after she was born, and that completely broke me. Yeah, so I actually ended up completely failing out because I just lost the will to do anything at that point. And so I realized that I had to pull myself together to honor her legacy, because she would not have been happy with what I was doing. And so when it comes to perseverance, I've always found, being grounded and have a higher purpose outside of yourself has been something that has really helped me. And also, I have this natural knack of problem solving, which, after you train thousands of people and you manage a lot of people, you realize problem solving is actually an art that is, number one, not taught in schools, and number two, not many people actually possess it.
It's true. It's something you have to learn. Definitely a skill you have to practice for sure.
Yep. Because like the early years of my career, like I thought I was being lazy, and that's why I was coming up with these fixes and doing these things. But I was like, no, I was seeing inefficient processes and whatnot, and I was problem solving and creating solutions. And I ended up being able to monetize that and then teach other people how to do the same.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And, it makes complete sense, in the face of some of those extreme challenges. I mean, losing a child is so tough. And, just the background that you grew up in, that you felt you needed to take a break for a little bit in college, but then you figured out how to use that as your strength and to sort of persevere and just continue on that path that you wanted to go down. And I think that's really inspiring. I was curious what advice you would give to those looking to build a career in cybersecurity who are maybe taking a less conventional or less traditional path to get there.
Yeah. So first of all, like if someone's interested in getting into cybersecurity and they're taking any path, which means they're taking action, I commend them for that, because there's a lot of people that want to get in cybersecurity because they hear about the earning potential, but they don't take any action. And so like what I would recommend doing is number one, actually searching your local network. And when I mean local network, I mean like city, municipalities. There are companies and programs out there that will actually give free training to people that want to make career transitions, like regardless of what career they're in. Like they will just, because the need for cybersecurity professionals is so high, you could actually get free training. Outside of that, if something is available, YouTube University is your friend. There's a lot of good things that you could learn on YouTube, but I would definitely caution people, because usually if you ask someone about, how do I get into tech or cybersecurity, especially somebody that's already been there, they'll start fumbling off all these different certifications that you should get. Telling somebody to get a certification is not giving them a path to a career, because there's over 75 different IT certifications that you could get and a myriad of different ways that you could go in cybersecurity because it's so broad. I was talking to some of my clients yesterday. I was like, when people ask me, how do I get into cybersecurity? I'm like, how do I explain this? Because I don't want to sound like I'm being a jerk, but I was like, here it is. Here it is. Let's say that you're in New York and you tell me that you want to move to Texas and you ask me for a recommendation. I was like, now think about this. Texas is bigger than most countries, right? And there's these huge metropolitan areas. You got Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, and then you got all the smaller little cities. That's exactly the way cybersecurity is, because there's coding, there's hacking, there's governance, there's risk, there's compliance, there's engineering. There's so many parts. And until you identify like what area suits you, it's going to be hard to break into cybersecurity because it's too broad. People get overwhelmed and then they just quit. So if somebody says, hey, I'm in New York and I want to move to Dallas, Texas, could you recommend a nice area? Well, that's much simpler, right? So if somebody says, hey, Boyd, I want to get into cybersecurity, I'm not very technical and I would like to get the fastest way in. And so I'd say, hey, governance, risk, and compliance. You could be a security auditor. You don't need certifications. You don't need college or coding skills. And so it helps me to give them a game plan to get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's such an important point, I think, in an industry that's so large like cybersecurity and encompasses so much. And I know you talk on your website as well about the importance of differentiating yourself when you're building a career in this field. So what are some practical ways or steps that those who are new to the field can do this and pick, a particular direction?
Yeah, so there's this thing that me and my wife like to encourage people to do. It's sort of like just write out a list of things that you enjoy doing, whether you were getting paid for them or not. And then take a look at your previous jobs and create like a T-chart. What did I like about this? What did I not like about this? So that you can start creating a profile for like this ideal type of role. Because in those tasks that you identify the things that you like to do, you could use like, for example, Chat GPT to say, find cybersecurity roles that include this skill or this thing, right? And it'll match you up with roles so that it'll be easier, number one, for you to transition, but you would actually be much happier in the process, because it's really not about how much money you can make in cyber. It's really about longevity, how long you can do it. And I've seen people end up in lucrative positions they're just miserable people because they're not doing what they love to do. So I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, finding what you love is so important. And I love the idea of using ChatGPT too. There's so much talk about that in the industry, the good and the bad of it, but that's a great way to use
Oh
it
yeah.
as a tool. So that's great. And I know in addition to your business, Baxter Clewis Consulting, you also founded Baxter Clewis Training Academy to help those who are interested in cybersecurity build careers. You founded this training academy during the pandemic, is that right? So
Yes.
how did that come together? And what value are you seeking to bring to those looking to build a career in this field?
Yeah, so that actually came about again through problem solving. I was actually working at a consulting company, and I was working with like some of the biggest names in the world doing security assessments. I'm flying all the world. I'm in India, I am in Australia, doing all these security assessments like all over. And I kept running into the problem that when I'm coming out to do these audits, the company staff, they didn't know what was going on. And so these projects kept getting extended because the company would have to fix things. I'd have to review it, kick it back because they needed to fix it again. And I'm like, okay, we're having this problem. I'm at this level. And then I thought about my time working for like the software company, people falling asleep. When I was working at American Airlines as the architect, I had to do a lot of training and coaching to get people to understand the standard. And that's when it hit me. I was like, man, if these problems are existing at these gigantic companies, what if I just trained the people and created the people to actually serve these roles? And that's when I created, at that point, it was Security Consulting Online because I didn't know much about business. And then the pandemic happened, and it started from there. And a few months into it, I finally convinced my wife to join, and then we rebranded as Baxter Clewis Training Academy because Baxter is actually my wife's maiden name, and so we were so passionate about what we're doing, we decided to put our name on it, and that's where Baxter Clewis Cybersecurity came from. I think the pandemic was the best thing that could have happened for our company. Couldn't have picked a better time because people were at home on the internet and looking for career changes. So it was just like a really good time for us from a business perspective.
Yeah, that's great. I love that story of how it came together. I love that you and your wife are working on this together and, doing what you love to help other people do what they love. I think that's awesome. And, as if you don't already do a million things, you're also an author. You have two books. And
Yep.
you want to talk about those? They're really interesting. So in your book, Through the Firewall, Turning Crisis into Opportunity, I know that you talk about how you learned, kind of as we talked about at the beginning, how to play the hand you were dealt and turn your challenges into opportunities. So can you talk a little bit more about not only how you've done that throughout your career, but how you hope to help others do that as well through your training academy?
Yeah. So I was fortunate to have people in my circle that challenged my viewpoint on things because I was born into a family where we didn't have a lot of money, had working class parents, they got divorced. It's like people had already written what my story would be. And so I'm like, why should I do anything to change it? Right. Where I come from, there's not a lot of successful people. And I had what they would call victim mentality so things were just happening to me instead of me looking at them in a different light about how can I actually view this positively to actually help me achieve my goals. And so I have this viewpoint that I really don't see problems. I see opportunities for improvement, whether that's improvement in myself or improvement in something else that's broken. And so that's a philosophy I've taken in my personal life, but I've also done that in my career. And it really helped me grow my career to the next level because I became what they would call, how do I put this? I was very offensive with my career. So like my job, the first job that I had where I transitioned into cybersecurity, the company knew that I was interested in cybersecurity because I started doing the work before they even assigned it to me. I sought out risk. I communicated what I found and what I thought should happen. And that was just something that I continue to do. And it really helped me not only in my career, but in business as well. But I noticed that while I was sitting in the break room, there were two types of people. There were ones that would be complaining about what's going on at work, and then there'd be the group strategizing about what could be done to address it. I didn't hang out with the complainers because that's just not my style. But that has been like one of the biggest things. And inside the book, at the end of each chapter, I give like takeaways and exercises so people can rewrite those negative narratives in their mind to help them ultimately advance not only just their career, but where they are in their life. Because one thing that I didn't mention was the piece of marketing that helped like explode our business came from trauma. It came from trauma. I actually interviewed for a position at American Airlines before I became the architect. I had all these certifications, had all the experience and everything, and they didn't hire me. And the feedback was I didn't have the skills that they were looking for. And so I had this thing that I call the unicorn theory. There are no unicorns. If I'm dealing with this, somebody else is. So I was like, I got certs, I got years of experience. Why can't I get a job? And so I created the training academy to help those people actually get the skills to get the job. And without my mindset coach, which happens to be my brother, helping me reframe that opportunity, because he was like, if they would have hired you for that position, you'd have never become the architect, never become the consultant, never become the business owner. And I'm just like, man, I dodged a major bullet. Although I was hurt at that time, it needed to happen.
Right. Yeah, and I love that. I love that advice to be offensive with your career. I think that's so important to keep in mind because you're right. So many people resort to, complaining or thinking, why is this happening to me rather than, what do I want to do about it? And, how can I take that initiative? And so I think that's such important advice. And it applies not only to individuals, but companies as well, when they're managing their cyber risk. So do you have any other advice for companies to learn from their setbacks when it comes to cyber, incidents, if they suffer a breach, how to get back up and still build successful companies?
Yes. At the end of every event, whether it's good or bad, there's an opportunity to reflect on what happened. And so if a company has been breached, or maybe they're concerned about being vulnerable, there's nothing wrong with recommend having a risk assessment done and actually face those issues head on. Oftentimes people get into trouble because number one, they assume that they are secure and assume that their their employees are up to speed with training, using secure protocols, and et cetera. But when it comes to business, especially cybersecurity, making assumptions could be detrimental to the company. Like you have to have assurance. That's why audits, following security standards, like regularly doing these things are super important. Especially in the event of a breach, you want to be able to show as much due diligence as possible to say, hey, we did these protocols, we did this patching, training every single month. Here's the evidence for it. And, nothing is foolproof, but you can sleep better at night knowing that you actually did this and had that certainty versus assuming that you were secure and then the worst happens.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Being offensive in that regard with your cyber risk management as well. And I think this is really interesting. You have another book called Corporate Security, Proven Ways to Reduce Cybersecurity Breaches. And you mentioned in it that insider threats actually pose the most risk for companies. And yes. I see you smiling. So can you talk about this and, how companies can manage those types of threats?
It's so funny because when I consult with companies, they try to tell me, they show me these fancy firewalls that they have to keep the bad guys out, all this threat detection for perimeter threats. And then I just walk right over to, employee's desk, sit down, plug my laptop in, or just get onto their computer. I'm like, so what are you doing about this? I'm like, I didn't consider that. Because one of the things that I would do as a security assessor is I would ask permission to see how far I could get in the building before I got there. Because social engineering is very, very real. And social engineering is essentially persuading people to do an action or believe that you are not a threat. And, I happen to think I'm a handsome guy and I like to smile. I will smile my way into any room. And then I will tell them, hey, this smile just defeated your multi-million-dollar security equipment.
Oh, that's so scary.
You see that? So the insider threat is so real. People need to be trained, but there also has to be monitoring and tools to prevent users from causing harm to a company, because sometimes it happens accidentally, but then you have those same people that are complaining would be the ones that could be malicious actors on the inside. So it's definitely something that should be on every CISO, CEO's risk list of like, what are my team members actually doing inside the network?
Yeah, that's such a scary type of threat because it's so easy to overlook. But I think it's so important. And, so obviously insider threats are important to manage, but are there any other things at companies that they should know about their cyber risk that they might be missing right now?
Yeah, definitely. The pandemic definitely showed us an area of risk that most businesses and companies didn't consider, and that is actually third-party vendor management. And so what I mean by that is if my company is reliant, let's say that we're a computer hardware manufacturer, whatnot, if our company is dependent on someone to ship, deliver, and bring these things in, who's to say that someone didn't implant malware in those computers that we're going to assume are safe and plug right into our network, right? So there has to be due diligence as well as vendor risk assessments done on companies before conducting business with them, because there are potential threats that companies would never look for that attackers are exploiting.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's great advice as well. And, we've covered so much throughout this conversation. I think we've given listeners a lot to think about. But, given everything we've talked about, I'm just curious how you've seen the cybersecurity field changing over the past few years, not only because of the pandemic, but, with ransomware and changes in technology, AI, like we talked about. What do you hope the field will look like a few years from now?
Yeah, so things have changed significantly. And what's funny is it's the threats have not. So like the threats of ransomware, it's like the same dog and pony show. Like companies change your passwords, patch your systems, strong access controls, back up to a remote site. Don't do it after the fact. It's going to cost you 10x, right? Simple hygiene, but it starts with the users to help offset a lot of these threats. But where the industry is going right now, there's this craze with artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence can be scary. And the reason why I say it can be scary, because like, who is maintaining the security of these the backend databases for these AIs? Because like I mentioned earlier, hey, use ChatGPT to do this for you to help you find a career. But how many other people are actually inputting personal information into ChatGPT and it's building a database to be able to keep track of your personal information? And what happens if that database gets compromised? Because it's an open platform, right? So those are things to consider. Also, what I would like to see are some security standards and regulations around AI, because it seems like every vendor or company that I'm working with has a new AI feature tool, and it really just concerns me with the integration and the lack of security around it.
It is risky, yeah, and it's scary to have these conversations about AI because things are advancing so quickly. But hopefully we'll get to a place of security in the future, and it can be used as a tool, as you mentioned, for these types of things, job searches and other things like that. But it'll definitely be interesting to see how things evolve. And this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed learning about you and your background, and some of the advice you shared for companies in managing their cyber risk is so helpful. So I appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you for having me.
That's all for this episode. Thanks to Boyd for taking the time to speak with me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Once again, my name's Elizabeth Blossfield, and I'm the host of the Insuring Cyber Podcast, a bi-monthly look into how the world of cyber and the business of insurance are connected. Be sure to check back for new episodes publishing every other Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Talk to you next time.